Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Americans for Contraception IUD Express Tour. We're in Miami, Florida today, and we're promoting awareness, education, and advocacy about the urgent need to protect IUDs and other contraceptives amid the escalating threat from conservative lawmakers and their extremist allies. So we have some really exciting guests for you today, and of course, our 20-foot IUD has made the trip to Miami. Our first guest needs no introduction, so let me welcome Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you to Americans for Contraception for bringing the massive IUD here to South Florida so that we can spotlight the importance of making sure that we elect pro-reproductive freedom candidates in the state of Florida and all over the country. We have to make sure that we promote awareness in the fight to protect access to contraception. This IUD sat outside the U.S. Capitol on the day last week when Republican senators refused to protect IVF in the law of the land. This outsized birth control symbol will never compare to how colossally hypocritical Republicans are on this issue. In the You Can't Make This Up department, last Thursday, the Medicare fraudster Rick Scott voted down a law that would protect in vitro fertilization, then had the cojones to release an ad the next day saying that he'd always protect it. Don't pee on my foot and then tell me it's raining. These guys have absolutely no shame. Rick Scott also voted against the Right to Contraception Act. The right to birth control is a Supreme Court protected right. Women cannot trust Rick Scott, period. All Florida voters need to know Debbie Mugersell-Powell will never let them down. She will never do that to Florida's women. But Rick Scott did. He refused to protect our most basic right to control our own bodies. Rick Scott told millions of women he gets to decide when we can start or grow our family, not us. Then he used his own family experience to lie about where he stands on IVF. That Trump-like deception is simply hideous. Senator, unlike your Medicare fraud case, you can't plead the fifth on this one. But this issue isn't an abstract concept for me. I want to share my IVF story. I personally struggled with infertility when I was 29 years old. My husband and I had been trying to have a family for over a year, and we had trouble conceiving. So I was able to use IVF to conceive our twins, who my colleague Frederica, we lived together when they were born, Rebecca and Jake, who are now healthy young adults, and then thankfully we gave birth to our youngest daughter Shelby, who was conceived naturally. After going through this process, I realized I had to do more. I've been fighting for years to expand health insurance coverage to protect and make IVF affordable. It is incredibly expensive and cost prohibitive for most families. And because of Republicans, we're still in this fight. As a breast cancer survivor, and this is important because it is a relatively new development, I know that a cancer diagnosis and the necessary treatments can affect a survivor's fertility. And for many, IVF is the only way that a cancer patient can begin to start a family after their treatment. For many survivors like me, especially Ashkenazi Jews who carry the BRCA2 mutation or other genetic mutations that make cancer much more likely, IVF can be a godsend and can prevent cancer from being passed down. Thanks to advances in research, embryos can now be tested, and those without the BRCA mutation can be implanted so that you can end the generational risk of cancer in families. That means my children could opt to use IVF because I am a BRCA2 mutation carrier to prevent that gene from being passed down in their families. And now, because of Republicans like Rick Scott, that promising future is clouded in uncertainty. These threats loom largely over our lives, and it means that Rick Scott and Republicans in Congress are opposed to ending generational cancer in families through using the miracle of IVF. Alabama just showed us how precarious access to IVF can be as well, and now politicians are trying to block emergency care for pregnant patients. Emergency care. The Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments in Idaho v. United States and Moyle v. United States, which will determine whether politicians can put doctors in jail for treating pregnant patients experiencing medical emergencies. These draconian laws show there are no limits to how extreme the MAGA opponents of reproductive freedoms will go. The ultimate decision in the case, expected out later this month, could have dire consequences on the health and lives of people nationwide facing emergency pregnancy complications. This ultra-MAGA court majority could actually allow states to deny pregnant people access to emergency abortion care that is necessary to prevent severe life-altering health consequences, even death. And states like ours, with our near-total abortion ban, could follow suit, forcing women to leave the state in emergencies. In a peninsula the length of Florida, that means devastating loss of life and dire health consequences for women facing an emergency in pregnancy, forcing them to risk their lives and pushing doctors away from our state in the midst of a massive doctor shortage. We can't let this MAGA minority continue to put women's lives at risk. This November, we have to row them out. We can't let extremists like Rick Scott decide when our daughters, sisters, and aunts can start a family. No judge or politician should ever have autonomy over a woman's future. All women deserve the right and the freedom to choose IVF, birth control, or abortion. So this November, we are going to row them out. Let's put strong women who will protect our abortion rights in the Senate, like Debbie Mukersol-Powell. Let's retake the House from MAGA Mike Johnson and make sure their MAGA cult leader never reoccupies the White House. And I so appreciate Americans for Contraception, and I want to introduce State Representative Ashley Gantt, who thankfully was able to take a seat from someone who was anti-gay rights and anti-choice. Representative Gantt, good to see you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. In my first term in the legislature, the Republicans passed a 6-week abortion ban. And I asked the bill sponsors, how close to death does a woman have to be in order for medical care and doctors to intervene? They had no answer. So which one is it? Do they want to protect life, or do they want to control contraception? It's all hypocrisy. It's about power. And I want to leave you with a sobering truth today. The truth is, they are okay with women dying for not having access to health care. They are okay with women not having control of their lives by trying to take away access to contraception. They don't care about you. So I challenge everyone, when are you going to get serious? When someone in your family dies, does it have to be your wife, your sister, your best friend? Or will your family be serious about how much of a threat to democracy, to bodily autonomy, to freedom this is? Does your family have to then get serious when you die? This is not a game. This is not some type of alternate reality. This is what we are facing. This is why we have to show up, be serious, and make sure that everyone that we know gets out and uses their voice, makes their voice heard to say we will protect freedom. We will protect women having bodily autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And now it's my honor to introduce Congresswoman Frederica Wilson.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be standing here with other champions for reproductive freedom from my colleagues in Congress, Debbie, the state legislature, Ms. Gantt, my sorority sister, and Shevrin, Men for Choice, who I have worked with. They actually came to Washington, D.C. to do an event with me with the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys, and I appreciate Men for Choice for that. Ruth's List, which has been around so long, helping elect women, and local officials. We are in front of a giant inflatable IUD. How about that? What's happening right now across the nation and on our state is absolutely outrageous. Just last month in Congress, MAGA Republicans refused to put the right to contraceptive bill on the floor, and they blocked the bill to protect contraception access. And across the nation, we're seeing MAGA Republicans sowing misinformation that inaccurately characterize IUDs, emergency contraception, and birth control pills as abortion. If it's not clear to you already, MAGA Republicans want to control the bodies of everyday women because for them, this is about power. We're about to approach the anniversary of Dobbs, where Roe v. Wade was overturned. And if we thought that wasn't enough, Republicans aren't just looking to ban abortion. They're looking to go even further, threatening to restrict contraception, access, and IVF. This is crazy. That's why in Congress, I'm introducing a bill to protect access to contraception in colleges and universities. I'm the ranking member of higher education. And that's why I've joined Democrats in Congress to force a vote on the Right to Contraception Act. Now, I remember when it was like before Roe v. Wade. As a little girl, my dream was always to have a lot of children. So as a young school teacher, I was pregnant, and my husband and I were so happy. That was before, however, at 7 months, our baby boy stopped kicking. Our world crumbled when our baby boy Wilson died in my womb. If the pain of losing a child wasn't already enough, the law prevented the doctor from inducing labor because at that time, Roe v. Wade had not yet become law, and it would have been considered as an abortion. The pain of losing my child was compounded by the weight of abstract legal restrictions. I lacked the strength to stand up or get out of bed as my child's remained disintegrated within my body, causing me to go into toxic shock. Months later, I was forced to deliver what was left of baby Wilson. Leaving the maternity ward in a wheelchair, arms empty and hard-shadowed, I saw families with newborns. I cried so I was sick. We held a small graveside burial for baby boy Wilson while doctors feared, because of my condition, I might soon join him in the grave. No one should have to endure what I endured. We can't go back. We cannot go back. As we approach the Dobbs anniversary and stand in front of this inflatable IUD, it's a stark reminder of the need to vote. You must vote to secure the right to abortion in this coming election. We have the ability to do this in Florida. It's a reminder that Republicans just don't want to stop at abortion, but they want to threaten its access to contraception and IVF. It's a reminder that in this election, you are choosing between freedom and tyranny, with the Republican Party wanting to control every aspect of every woman's body. We cannot let this happen. We must fight back, and everyone must get off the sidelines, including men, like Men for Choice. Help us. This is a family issue. We must vote in November because abortion is literally on the ballot here in Florida. People, not politicians, should be in control of their own reproductive health. And we can't let Republicans continue to control our reproductive freedom. We cannot go back. I beg you, Do not let us go back to before Roe v. Wade. And now, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, and thank you to both our congresswomen for voting for the discharge petition in the U.S. House, because every Floridian deserves a representative that supports your right to contraception. And now it's my honor to introduce State Senator Shevrin Jones.
Thank you so much, Laura. And first, I want to honor our Congresswomen, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Congresswoman Wilson, who, truth be told, have been fighting these fights far before they got to Congress. They've been fighting these fights when they were in the state legislature. So thank you both so much. And thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, for your story. I think we all have heard that reproductive health is a fundamental aspect of the overall well-being. It is essential for Floridians to have the right to make informed decisions about their bodies and about their futures, about if and when and how to start and grow their own families. But yet and still, we constantly see again where MAGA Republicans from Tallahassee all the way down to D.C. will stop at nothing to attack those very rights and those very freedoms. For years, we've seen it. I've seen it. I'm sure Congresswoman Wilson has seen it. I'm sure Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz has seen it. And that these politicians in Washington and Tallahassee and state capitals from all across this country have mounted a concerted effort to restrict the access to abortion and other reproductive health services. And this is absolutely deeply troubling and disturbing because it absolutely undermines the ability of individuals to make those decisions about their own health care. What's the result of that? The result of that is the far-reaching consequences on reproductive health, influencing access to services such as contraception, abortion, and maternal care. And these, now, mind you, these are the same politicians who have also targeted IVF and family planning. Individuals like Rick Scott, who says in one breath that he supports an IVF, but then in another breath he votes against it. Now they have their sights that's set on contraception. And I don't have to tell a lot of you this, but contraception isn't just about family planning. People use birth control for a whole host of different reasons, whether it's to help with fibroids, whether it's help with cramping, or any number of other health reasons. And at the end of the day, politicians do not belong in doctors' offices, and they surely don't belong in individuals' bedrooms. You know what? Out of one side of their mouth, these extremists, they talk about protecting liberty and talk about protecting freedoms, all the while taking those freedoms away, hoping that we don't take notice. So we really don't live in the free state of Florida. And Congresswoman Wilson said it best, that this is a power grab that we are seeing right now. And where we have taken notice and putting them on notice now for November. They have chipped away at one thing after another, and it is absolutely up to us to stand up and speak out, and we can do that in just a few months. These attacks on our well-being are harmful, not just for only the millions of individuals who this impacts, but it's also a broader public health and economic crisis that we can go into if we do not stop these extremists where they are right now. And that's why we are all gathered here this morning and working from now through November and beyond to restore Floridians' rights and ensure that every voter knows the stakes of this upcoming election. And I think we're very clear on what that means right behind us. It is important that we all stay informed about these issues and to advocate for these policies that protect and expand reproductive rights for all. We must continue to call these harmful attacks out, and we need to call them what they are and keep fighting so that everyone has the ability to make those decisions about their own bodies and health care. Through the continued advocacy, education, and the support, we can protect and uphold the essential rights and autonomy of all Floridians when it comes to reproductive health. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now it's my honor to introduce Commissioner Maria Rodriguez.
Good morning. Buenas tardes. I wanted to simply echo what our other Congress people and representatives have been saying. A lot of us, especially in the Hispanic community, came to this country in the search of freedom, looking for opportunity and making sure that we had the freedom to choose what to do with our own being. And at this point, we've come to the realization that sometimes the senators that we vote in are not doing that. They are not protecting our freedoms. So I'll kind of go back and say that in Spanish. En la comunidad hispana, muchos de nosotros vinimos a los Estados Unidos en busca de la oportunidad y de la libertad. Desafortunadamente, los senadores como Rick Scott y Marco Rubio han votado contra esas libertades. La libertad de decidir qué hacemos con nuestras familias, la libertad de decidir si nuestra familia es creada o decidir si aguantamos un rato más. Es súper importante para nuestra comunidad identificar que no solo es esas limitaciones a nuestras libertades, pero a la planificación de nuestras familias. Los hijos son lo más hermoso del mundo y la persona debe tener la oportunidad de hacer esa decisión y decidir cuándo van a crear una familia o de qué forma, y tomar esas medidas de esos avances médicos para asegurarnos que estamos creando las familias que queremos y tener en cuenta que las elecciones tienen consecuencia. Nosotros votando por alguien que no tiene nuestros mejores intereses en mente es absolutamente incorrecto. Tenemos que tomar en cuenta, hablar con nuestras familias, mirar las plataformas de estos políticos que ponemos en poder y asegurarnos que estamos haciendo esas conexiones para que tengamos esas libertades, no solo hoy, pero para el futuro y para el futuro de nuestros hijos también. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I'd like to introduce Aaron Bos-Lun from Men for Choice.
Thank you very much, Laura, and to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Representative Gantt, Shevrin Jones, and Congresswoman Wilson, of course, and everyone for being here today. My name is Aaron Bos-Lun, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Men for Choice, where we educate, activate, and mobilize pro-choice men to step up as allies for reproductive freedom. And I have three things I want to talk about today. The first is that idea of men being active on this issue. The second is the idea of life. People who claim to be so concerned with abortion often claim that it's in the name of being pro-life, and then we'll talk a little about that. And then finally, about Rick Scott himself, who is making it his business to be in other people's business in a lot of inappropriate ways. So the first point, men. You know, to the question of whether or not men should be active on this issue, it's a bit of a moot point, because men already are active on this issue. It's just unfortunately only the men who are opposed to everyone's right to control their own body. Men like Rick Scott, who think that they know better than women and patients what that they should do with their own body. Across the United States last year, there were about 1,511 votes taken in state legislatures to ban or criminalize abortion, including right here in Florida. 83% of those votes were taken by men. And yet, when it comes to days like today, we know that women like Debbie Wasserman Schultz have been leading on this for a long time. Laura has been leading for a long time. My good friend Kayla has been leading on this for a long time. And yet, men are not doing our part. And it's time for that to change, because it doesn't end with abortion. If the government has the ability to control people's private medical decisions, what comes next? This giant IUD behind us serves as a reminder that this road starts with banning abortion, it does not end with it, and let's not find out where Rick Scott wants for it to go. Second, to the point about life, this term pro-life, they like to kick it around, and I think they got away with it for a long time because many of us thought that Roe v. Wade was settled law and they couldn't really ban and criminalize abortion and take this where they always said they wanted to take this. But pro-life, if this were about life, these same people who are so opposed to abortion would be very concerned with prenatal health. They'd be very concerned with the state of maternal mortality in this country, in particular for black women. They would be champions for universal pre-K. They would be concerned with public schools. And we know they are concerned with none of those things. People like Rick Scott being in favor of birth to the point that they will force women to bear children bears no relationship to supporting life. And it's time for people like Rick Scott to take a little more seriously the idea of supporting the women who are already here, rather than using these discredited talking points that bear no relationship to the actual policies they fight for. Because at the end of the day, this is not about life. This is about freedom and power and control. If you're a man, in what world are you better off if the government is able to tell your partner what she can do with her own body? In what world are we better off if Rick Scott is able to get between a husband and wife or an LGBT couple or whatever it might be and tell them what to do? I'm fairly confident, I can't say this for sure, but I'm fairly confident in saying never in the history of the state of Florida has a single woman been faced with this type of private medical decision and thought, I really wonder what Rick Scott thinks I should do. That isn't a thing that happens. And it's not appropriate for him to be injecting himself in the law. It is time for pro-choice men to get off the sidelines and into the fight, not as leaders of this movement, but as supporters of people like the women on this stage today. There are creepy men like Rick Scott who want to control people's private medical decisions, and it's time for the good guys to do their part. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Aaron. And next, I'd like to introduce Kayla Cartwright Miranda.
Thank you all. Good afternoon. Thank you for dedicating your time and energy. Thank you to the Congresswomen, both of them, for sharing their personal stories. I'm Kayla Cartwright Miranda, and while I do hold the title of chair of the local volunteer network of Ruth's List, I am mainly here today as a private citizen and everyday Floridian to illuminate what's happening and what we need to do about it. Let's jump right in and discuss the elephant in the room, or rather, the IUD in the room. Why is there a 20-foot IUD standing next to us? I didn't take my ibuprofen, and I'm really not prepared for this. Well, the reason is because some things happened last week, as we've heard. Last week, the U.S. Senate put forth the Right to Contraception Act, which would guarantee that everyday Americans, everyday Floridians like ourselves, can access birth control of our choosing. This should be a no-brainer, right? It should be common sense that we have the right to choose when to have a family, and that access to contraception to aid in that choice should be available to us. Yet all but 2 Senate Republicans voted against this protection and this liberty, including our 2 Florida senators, Marco Rubio and Rick Scott. But wait, there's more. Last week, the Senate also put forth the Right to IVF Act, and the same people voted the same way, meaning our 2 Florida senators voted against legislation that would make it a right for women to access in vitro fertilization and other fertility treatments, something that many Republicans have supported in the past, as we've heard. I really do need the ibuprofen, y'all, but not for the IUD. I need it for the pain I have from this extremist Republican whiplash. And here's the thing. These 2 incidents happened quietly. So quietly, in fact, that at one of my weekend brunches with the girls, none of them had even heard the news. Yet when I went around the room, every single one of these educated professional women from across the political spectrum was using or had used birth control at some point in our lives. This isn't surprising to me, given that when surveyed, 80% of Americans support access to contraception. Are you one of these 80% who doesn't want society to go backwards? It's been common sense to me my entire adult life, really since middle school sex ed class, that I should use and have access to contraception. To think about not having yet another choice because of extremist elected officials makes me furious and fearful about further liberties being taken away, impacting my own economic livelihood and those of millions of individuals across the country. Some will argue that this is a false alarm. The Supreme Court indeed did rule in 1965 that a state ban on contraceptions violated the right to privacy for married couples. However, given the fall of Roe nearly 2 years ago to the date, we know we can't count on the current Supreme Court to uphold our rights and liberties granted by previous rulings. So what do we need to do about this? What can you do as an everyday Floridian, a person who wants to protect their choices and liberties? My ask is threefold. Get out the vote, listen and share, and take action. 1, get out to vote. At a minimum, please register to vote and vote in every election. Local politics are not only where the policies that affect our everyday are influenced, but it's where benches are built. Who we elect locally now is often who will become our federal officials and federal electeds of the future. Think about who you want representing you in D.C. Oh, and speaking of D.C., let's definitely get out the vote to Get Rick Scott out of the U.S. Senate and Debbie Merkisel-Powell in. Every vote counts. 2, listen and share. Talk about this with your friends. Chances are, if you're paying attention, you might be the only one of your brunch babes or your gym buddies doing so, and you need to talk about this, though in a non-threatening way. Provide facts, be inviting, and listen without being reactive, for we know when people feel heard is when they become the most open-minded. Nudge your friends to pay attention and to consider whether they want extremist elected officials in office, electeds who will continue to chip away at women's rights. Encourage your friends to vote for pro-choice Democratic women up and down the ballot. We know what's at stake and know how to fix it. Third, take action. For those who want bonus points, get involved in local elections and advocacy. Volunteer to text, calls, or knock on doors to spread the word for the Yes on 4 campaign and to make sure we elect people who we're proud to send to Tallahassee and Washington. Better yet, have you thought about running for office? You should. We need values-driven Democrats to lean into their communities to serve in elective office. If extremists want to chip away at our reproductive freedoms, well, we're going to have to chip away at their political power. So get out to vote, share and listen, and take action. Let's do this as often as we can so we can push to have a Florida in a country that ensures women have the reproductive access and economic choices that we've cultivated over the last 50 years. Let's not turn back the clock now, and let us ensure every woman has the right to make her own decisions about her body and her family without government interference.
Thank you, Kayla. We're here today with a giant IUD because we're facing a truly massive problem. The Supreme Court has taken away other of our reproductive freedoms, and we need to make sure that we protect our right to contraception. Thank you.